The USD Empire, the dominant currency in the global power play. In human history, no currency has ever possessed an influence as widespread as the United States dollar. USDIT is not just a means of payment, not just a unit of value, but also a symbol of the United States' power on the international stage. IT is called the USD Empire, an empire that needs nitrogen monoxide army to conquer but can still control the economy of the entire world. To understand the power of the United States dollar, let's turn back to the aftermath of World War II. In 1944, the Bretton Woods Conference was held, with the participation of 44 nations. As a result, a new financial system was formed. The USD became its center, pegged to gold at a rate of $35 per ounce. And all other currencies were pegged to the United States dollar. This turned the US into the world's banker, as most countries held USD reserves to stabilize their own currencies. Although President Richard Nixon announced the end of the USD's convertibility to gold in 1971, an event known as the Nixon shock, instead of weakening, the USD grew even stronger. The reason was simple. The US had built a foundation of trust and a system that forced the entire world to depend on its currency. Oil, the lifeblood of energy. WAS traded primarily in United States creating the concept of the petrodollar. International loans, global trade, and even the foreign exchange reserves of most central banks became tied to the United States dollar. As a result, the USD became the world's #1 reserve currency. Today, approximately 60% of global foreign exchange reserves are in USD. 80% of international trade transactions use the United States dollar, and the majority of international debt is issued in USD. This grants the US an enormous advantage. It can print money to spend, while the rest of the world accepts and holds the USD as a safe haven asset. This power is also known as the exorbitant privilege. When the US runs a budget deficit, IT simply needs to issue treasury bonds, and the entire world is willing to buy them. When the US needs money to finance a war or a crisis, it can print more with little fear of losing confidence, because the USD has become the global standard. This is an advantage that nitrogen monoxide other nation possesses. But the USD is not just an economic tool. IT is also a political weapon. The US can sanction a country by blocking its access to the United States dollar, freezing international transactions, and removing IT from the SWIFT system. Iran, Venezuela, Cuba, and Russia have all experienced this power. When a country is cut off from the United States dollar, IT's economy is virtually paralyzed, as global trade cannot function normally. Of course, this hegemonic status has also created a backlash. China, Russia, and many other countries are trying to reduce their dependence on the United States dollar by promoting bilateral trade in their own currencies, holding more gold reserves, or developing their own payment systems. Cryptocurrencies and initiatives like the digital yuan are also seen as tools to challenge the United States dollar. However, to date, no currency has been strong enough to replace its central position. What is interesting is that the USD Empire has no territory and nitrogen monoxide borders, yet its power is present everywhere. When you buy something online, when a company signs an international contract, when a country imports oil, the USD plays a core role. IT is like the lifeblood of the global economy, and the US is the heart that pumps IT. The question is, can this empire fall? History shows that nitrogen monoxide power is permanent. Before the United States dollar, the British pound was the world's dominant currency for over a century, but after World War II, the burden of debt and economic decline caused the pound to cede its place to the United States dollar. If one day the US economy weakens severely, or if the world finds a sufficiently strong alternative, the throne of the East could be shaken. But for now at least, The USD remains the uncrowned king of global finance. And in this power play, whoever holds the United States dollar can determine the fate of the entire world. Although the USD holds a hegemonic position, behind its dominance lie many contradictions and risks. The entire world relies on the USD for trade, for reserves, and for economic protection. But this very reliance makes the global financial system vulnerable when the US faces a crisis. Remember 2008 when the US real estate bubble burst? The whole world was immediately thrown into turmoil. From Europe to Asia, banks large and small collapsed. Stock markets plummeted, and millions of people lost their jobs. IT was the clearest evidence. A single stumble by the United States dollar empire can make the entire planet tremble. In other words, the USD is both a foundation of stability and the Achilles heel of the global economy. Another aspect few notice is the cost other countries bear to maintain the USD as the central currency. When the US prints more money, countries holding USD reserves see the value of their assets decline. When the Fed raises interest rates, capital immediately flows out of emerging markets, causing currency crises in many places. In the 1990s, Asia experienced the Asian financial crisis, partly because the USD became a trap, attracting hot money, only to see it withdrawn in a flash. The power of the USD also gives the US superior soft power. It is not just about imposing sanctions, but also the ability to shape the rules of the global financial game. Institutions like the IMF and the World Bank, headquartered in the US, and in which the US has a dominant voice, often implement policies that serve the interests of the dollar. This makes many countries feel constrained, even dependent. However, it is precisely from this dependency that the de-dollarization movement is emerging. Russia and China have increased trade settlements in the ruble and the yuan. Some Middle Eastern countries are considering selling oil in currencies other than the United States dollar. Even the idea of a common currency for BRICS. Brazil, Russia, India, China, South Africa has been put on the table for discussion. Although nitrogen monoxide currency truly threatens the USD's position, yet these movements show that the world nitrogen monoxide longer wants a monopolistic king forever. Another interesting point, the USD is not just an economic tool, but also a symbol of culture and trust. The image of the greenback, featuring portraits of American presidents, appears everywhere, from street markets in Africa and cafes in the Middle East to trading floors in New York, becoming a global icon. In many countries with weak local currencies, people even keep USD under their pillows rather than trusting their own domestic banks. This trust creates a feedback loop. The more people believe in the United States dollar, the stronger it becomes, and the stronger it is, the more it reinforces its dominance. However, every empire eventually weakens. The question is, how much longer can the USD maintain its throne? Some experts argue that, as long as the US continues to maintain its economic, technological, and military strength, the USD will remain the hegemon for at least a few more decades. But if the US public debt crisis becomes severe, or if nations coordinate effectively to create an alternative system, the balance of power could shift. Regardless, at present, the USD remains the heart of the global financial system. From mega corporations on Wall Street to small market vendors, from the governments of major powers to expatriate workers, all depend on it to some extent. And when we speak of the power of the United States, we cannot think only of its mighty military or advanced technology. We must also think of the USD Empire, a soft but profound power that silently shapes the entire world.